boys and girls. I am really glad to see you again. How are you doing? I have to tell you, I am really tired right now. Did you ever have a super busy week and it was a lot of fun maybe, but by the time it was all over, you were just really tired and maybe your arms and legs were sore? Well, I had that really busy week. I was in a game, kind of like a scavenger hunt, but it was something that involved making a whole lot of things and doing a whole lot of things. I'll show you just a couple of them. We had to paint our faces on face masks. I had to learn how to weave pictures. And I even made a kite out of only things from nature. There were many other things I had to do. Write music and go talk to people about important things, but it's all done now. I could take a deep breath and I'm glad to be able to recover and spend some time now with you guys. So, are we ready to get started? Clap your hands if you love stories. Clap your hands, I know you do. I'm so glad that we could be together. Glad to share a story time with you. Our first story I'm going to tell today is about a bear. Well, it's actually about all bears. This story is an Ojibwe legend. That's a Native American tribe. And it's going to tell us the story of why bears have short tails. So a long time ago, before there were any people around, there were all kinds of animals. There were birds and deer and mice and rabbits and bears, and they all spoke the same language, so they could all talk to each other. And some of the animals were nice to each other and helped each other out when they needed it, and some of the animals were mischievous and liked to play tricks. Just like people, right? Anyway, one day in winter, all the lakes had frozen. Did you ever see a frozen lake in the winter? Did you ever see people fishing on that frozen lake? They cut a hole in the ice and they fish down in there because the fish are still awake and swimming around underneath the ice. Anyway, it was that time of year, and it was before Bear had taken his winter-long nap, before he had gone to hibernate, and he was walking along the lake and he saw Otter. That was another animal that was down by the water, and he had a huge pile of fish next to him, next to a hole in the ice. And Bear said, "Well, that's a mighty fine big pile of fish that you have there, Otter. How did you get them all?" Well, you know how I said some of the animals were tricky? Otter was one of those animals. And he decided he, rather than tell Bear the truth, wanted to play a joke. And he noted that Bear, back then, all bears, instead of having little tiny stubby tails, had long, fancy, furry tails. They were really beautiful, and sometimes Bear got a little bit proud of his tail. So Otter said, "Well, the way I catch my fish is I put my tail down in this ice hole. And then when a fish comes by, I wiggle my tail a little bit, and the fish bites onto it, and I just pull it right back up. And that's how I catch the fish." The Bear said, "Well, that certainly sounds like an easy way to catch fish. Do you mind if I give it a try?" That was exactly what Otter was hoping that Bear would say. So he hid his laughs behind Bear's back, and he said, "Well, I have enough fish. Why don't you use my hole for as long as you like?" And he picked up his fish and he walked away, just to where the bear couldn't see him anymore and he could see Bear. And Bear sat down and put his long furry tail down into the ice. And he waited, and he waited. But you see, Otter hadn't been telling the truth. Fish don't really bite onto tails when they're under the water. So Bear sat there for a very long time, waiting and waiting and waiting, until the sun started to go down. And, well, this was really close to when Bear would want to go to sleep for the whole winter. And so he was tired and yawning. And he fell sort of into a little cat nap there on the ice. But eventually he woke up and decided he didn't really care about fish much anymore. He just wanted to go home and go to sleep. And so he decided to give up, and he stood up. Well, he tried to, but all that while, when he'd been sitting there, the ice had been forming around and around his tail. And when he tried to stand up, his tail was stuck, frozen to the ice. And he couldn't even move, and he pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled at his tail, but it was stuck. And eventually he gave a big mighty pull, and he lost his tail. Well, Otter started laughing, and Bear heard Otter laughing, and he chased him. I don't know if he caught him or not. I'll let you decide what you think about that. But the one thing we do know is that from then on, all bears had little short, stubby tails. And if you don't believe me, you can go to the zoo and look at one and see for yourself. But remember, the moral of this story is, don't always believe what everyone tells you. How about we do a finger play about bears now? Show me one little bear, one little finger. One little bear playing peekaboo. Along came another, and then there were two. Two little bears climbing up a tree. Up climbed another, and then there were three. Three little bears fishing from the shore with fishing poles. Along came another, and then there were four. Four little bears said, "Let's find a beehive." Along came another, and then there were five. Five little bears eating honey in the sun. Along came the bees, and then there were none. All right, now I have another story about someone who probably should have thought a little bit harder before he made his choices. This is the story of King Midas. Now, King Midas lived a very, very long time ago, and he lived in a palace that he loved, and he had lots and lots of lovely things that made him very happy. Most of all, though, the thing that he loved the very most was his daughter. He loved his little girl, and her name was Marigold. Marigold, because the thing he loved second in the world, right behind Marigold, was gold. He loved the way it shined. He loved the way it felt cool to the touch. He just loved gold. And he was very, very rich, so he had a lot of it. Anyway, one day, he was out in his courtyard, and he was admiring all the golden statues and golden decorations, and just smiling to himself about all of his wonderful, wonderful riches and gold, when he saw a strange little boy sitting beside some of the bushes. Now, it was really strange to see him there, because this was the king's private courtyard. There weren't supposed to be any little boys in there. So he walked over to him, but as he did, he saw something strange. The boy's face seemed to shine with an interesting glow. He didn't look like an ordinary boy, and the king realized that something was up, and he'd better be careful. The boy stood up and started walking toward him, and then the king saw the boy had wings. He was a fairy boy. And the fairy said to the king, "King Midas, you are the richest man in the whole world. There's no king who has as much gold as you do." And the king said, "Well, that may be the case. I have whole rooms full of gold back in my castle, but if I had my way, I would have even more gold, because it's the best and most wonderful thing in the world." And the fairy wrinkled his forehead and he said, "Are you sure about that?" The king said, "I'm very sure." See, he wasn't thinking about his daughter or any other person at that moment. And the fairy said, "Your Majesty, if I could give you one wish, would you ask for more gold?" And the king said, "If I only had one wish, I would wish that everything I touched would turn to gold." And the fairy said, "Well, if that's your wish, I will give it to you, but I don't think it's going to make you happy at all." And the king said, "I think that I'll take that risk." And the fairy said, "Fine. When you wake up in the morning, you will have your wish." Well, the The king went to bed early that night so that he could wake up early and see if he'd gotten his wish that everything he touched would turn to gold. And that morning, when he got up, he swung his legs out of bed, put his feet into his slippers, and his slippers turned to gold. They were beautiful. He loved them. He did have to note that they were perhaps not as comfortable as they had been when they were made out of cloth and soft things, but that didn't matter because they were gold. He ran his hand over the pillow on his bed and it turned into solid gold, hard as a rock, but beautiful. He was thrilled. He went around the whole castle touching everything that he could touch. He went into his royal dining room and he touched the napkins and they turned to gold. And he touched the silverware and they turned to gold. And his servants brought him his royal breakfast. And he touched one of the sausages and brought it to his mouth and almost broke his teeth because the sausage had turned to solid gold. That wasn't so fun. So he picked up his glass of juice and went to drink it, and it didn't even come out of the glass because the moment it touched his lips, it turned to gold. Well, that wasn't very good. He tried to grab his toast next. It turned into gold. He tried to grab for a banana, but it turned into gold. He couldn't eat or drink anything. And his slippers were starting to hurt his feet. And he was starting to maybe understand what the fairy was saying, that maybe it wasn't going to be so nice if everything he touched turned to gold. He remembered the way sausages had tasted when he ate them before. And he remembered the cool feeling of orange juice running down his throat. And he thought, what if I never get to have those things again? And he went out into his courtyard where there was a beautiful fountain flowing with water, spraying rainbows into the air around it. And he went over and he ran his finger in the water and it stopped. It was a beautiful golden statue of water. And he felt heartbroken. And just then Marigold ran out to the courtyard and she saw him and she said, "Daddy, what's wrong?" And he said, "Oh, I'm just feeling so sad." And Marigold said, "I want you to feel better. Let me give you a big hug." And he yelled, "No, stop." But before he could stop her, she ran up and threw her arms around his waist. And then he had nothing but a golden statue for a daughter hugging him. And his heart was almost shattered in his chest. And he started to cry. And he called out, "Fairy, fairy, where are you?" And the fairy came peeking out from behind one of the bushes. And he said, "Well, Your Majesty, do you still think that gold is the most beautiful thing in the world? Do you still think that your world would be wonderful if everything was gold?" And the king said, No, I never want to see gold again." And the fairy said, "Sure that you no longer want the golden touch?" And the king said, "I've learned my lesson. I want my wish to go away and never have happened before." And the fairy said, "Very well. I want you to take this pitcher to the spring in the garden out behind the servants' quarters. And when you fill it with water, it will stay water. And then go sprinkle it on everything that turned to gold." And the king took the pitcher and he ran. And he was a little worried that the water he was going to fill the pitcher with was going to turn to gold, but it didn't. And he ran. And the very first thing he did was sprinkle some of that water over the head of Marigold. And she, just like that, was back to a real living princess. And he picked her up and spun her around her and gave her a big kiss. And then laughing, he ran through the palace, pouring water on everything. And Marigold ran with him, laughing, because she didn't understand what had happened, but she was so happy to see that her father was no longer sad. And by the time he had finished, nothing that he had turned was still turned. And he even sprinkled every sausage in the kitchen, just to be sure. We're going to sing the song, "I've Been Working on the Railroad Now." Do you know that song? Well, even if you do, I've got some more words that maybe you haven't heard before anyway. But what I want you to do is I want you to get some things that you can click together, that we can maybe make the sound sort of like a railroad, sort of like a train going down the tracks. Kind of, right? If you have sticks, that's great, or you can get some wooden spoons that you can click together, pretty much anything that you can click. If you don't have anything at all, you can clap your hands. That'll work too. So, when you're ready, Here we go. All right? I've been working on the railroad all the livelong day. I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Can't you hear the whistle blowing? Rise up so early in the morn. Can't you hear the captain shouting? Dinah, blow your horn. Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow your horn? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow your horn? I've been working on the trestle, driving spikes that grip. I've been working on the trestle to be sure the ties won't slip. Can't you hear the engine coming? Run to the stanchion of the bridge. Can't you see the big black smokestack coming down the ridge? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow the horn? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow your horn? Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Someone's in the kitchen, I know. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah, strumming on the old banjo and singing fee-fi, fiddly-I-o, fee-fi, fiddly-I-o, fee-fi, fiddly-I-o, strumming on the old banjo. Let's do the beginning again, okay? I've been working on the railroad all the livelong day. I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Can't you hear the whistle blowing? Rise up so early in the morn. Can't you hear the captain shouting? Dinah, blow your horn. Well, Bear and I had a really great time with you again this week, even if I was still a little bit tired. You know what? One of the things that we had to do this week in this game is probably something that you could do. One of the things that we had to do was to find something that we could make a wish on. But it couldn't be a birthday cake candle, and it couldn't be a star in the sky, and it couldn't even be a coin that you flip and throw into a fountain. It had to be something that you found that's special just for you. Maybe you don't have a fairy hiding in your garden, but I bet you have something special. Can you tell me what that is? Can you tell me what it is that's around you, maybe in your house, maybe in your yard, that you can make wishes on? I would love to hear it. I would love to see if you could draw a picture of it for me. Anyway, let's get a big stretch, shall we? Here we go. Let me see you reach for the ceiling. Let's a good stretch, Bear. And touch the floor. Stand up again. Let's do some more. Touch your head. And now your knees. Up to your shoulders. Like this, you see. Reach for the ceiling. Ooh. And touch the floor. That's all there is. There isn't any more. See you later, boys and girls.